Hello and welcome to Voices of the Vic podcast with me, Ben Aiton, and Mike Duffy. And we're back with Jacob Deacon. He's back with his second appearance. I don't know if you remember, he was on last season for the Leeds United review. I think it was the day of the supporters committee as well, and Jacob brought up a lot of good reasons on that, and I thought it was about time to bring him back on with his views and opinions on what's going on behind the scenes with a hierarchy and everything else. It'd be interesting to get Jacob's views on that. But firstly, Mike, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Not done a great deal this weekend. Watched the game. Shame we couldn't hold on to the win, but other than that, all good, thanks, mate.
Good stuff. And Jacob, good to see you at football yesterday. How are you doing, mate?
Very good. Yeah, thanks chaps for having me back on. As you rightly say, the last time I was on was after that defeat to Leeds, and obviously the day after the infamous fans committee situation. So you're potentially a little bit calmer on today's podcast. I wasn't banned after the last podcast, so I'm still here to fight another day anyway.
You must have done something right to come back. That's what I'm going to say. But yeah, it's great to have you back on, mate. But yeah, just before we get into the Watford news from yesterday with the 2-2 draw and the Cristiano Giaretta stepping down or being stripped of his director of football position at Watford, there's a few things we just want to go over quickly. Obviously, everyone here at the Voices of Vic send our condolences to the royal family after the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. She was 96 years old and she was at the reign for 70 years. Our thoughts go out to the royal family. And I must say it was really well received at Vicarage Road yesterday for that minute silence. You could hear a pin drop and it was absolutely fantastic. And then secondly, just want a quick mention for my local football team, Berkhamsted FC. They've reached the FA Cup third qualifying round for the first time in their history after beating Concord Rangers 2-0 at home yesterday, and Concord Rangers were two divisions above them, which is the same standard as Hemels. I think it's Conference South they're in. So it was a massive scoop for Berkhamsted yesterday, so a big shout out to them. But yeah, we're a Watford podcast. We'll jump back straight into the Watford talk. So it was 5 changes Rob Edwards made to the team that lost 2-0 away at Blackburn Rovers midweek. We saw Courtney Hawes come back in, True-Seacon, Kamara, Espria, and Keenan Davis got his first start for Watford as well, and also reverted back to a back 4 with Craig Cathcart going over to that right hand side. Mike, with that team news, what was your thoughts on the team news? And obviously you was pleased to see Keenan Davis get that start.
Yeah, mate, I thought the team news was the best it can be. I thought we needed a change after Blackburn. I watched Blackburn on Tuesday night and it was absolutely woeful. Just no fight, no passion, no desire, nothing. Basically reverting back to last season. What we didn't have last season was like Blackburn all over again. Back 4, absolutely, fine with that. Kamara back on the left-hand side, which he prefers. He's a much better player on that left-hand side. Courtney Hawes, we saw what he was like at Rotherham. He's probably the calmest defender I've seen in a Watford shirt. The calmest on the ball since Marco Cassetti days. Possibly Angela as well. And Craig Cathcart out at right-back. You mentioned on Twitter, Ben, that you were having a conversation with one of the listeners. And you mentioned how well he played in that right-back role against Norwich the season that we went up. I thought Cathcart again had a brilliant game. And True-Seacon, I think it was his first start. And I must say, hats off to him. I thought he did absolutely superb, or as well as he could. I'm sure we'll touch upon that. But yeah, the big one for me was Davis had to start. He was the only shining light out of that Blackburn game. Just the ball sticks to him and he's phenomenal. And I'm glad that he got his first goal. So hopefully he's going to cement his place in that starting 11 now. But team news-wise, I was happy. I thought it was the best team we could have put out with the options we had available.
Yeah, and Jacob, obviously we met up before the game like we normally do in like the walkabout and that, and we saw the team news come out and I showed you it, and then we heard about it being 4 at the back, and you were saying to me before we actually met, saying you hate playing 5 at the back, and you was obviously pleased that it did revert back to a back 4.
Yeah, it's just not for me, the 5 at the back. I know some people like it. And formations a lot of the time are probably down, from a fan's perspective, I feel like it's down to preference. For me, I just don't like it. I'm not a fan of it. I think what I said to you yesterday, the wing back, the demand on the wing backs, effectively covering that whole flank. I think it's so demanding for them to do that for 90 minutes solid. It's quite easy to exploit. And personally, I just think playing a back four actually also not only makes us more solid defensively, but gives us more going forward. We then have more people in midfield, more people moving forward as well. I just think it's a much better system. And I think with the players we've got, I think we're more suited to a four. And you often hear, people say as well, when you use a back five, this has maybe been the argument with England and Southgate using a back five as well. You normally use a back five when you can't trust two centre halves to play in a back four. Maybe that's been the thinking more, so I don't know. But obviously we know with Rob Edwards' history at Forest Green, he likes the back five there as well. So clearly that's his preferred formation. But from a personal preference, I'm definitely a man in favour of back four, for sure.
Yeah, and maybe we saw with that squad yesterday that Watford really don't have that squad depth at the moment, Mike. And obviously recruitment's been a big talk over the last few weeks, and obviously fans would have wanted more numbers in for the building. But looking at the bench, and I think we saw it yesterday with our substitutions, that we didn't have that depth. And when Sunderland made their changes, they made a difference coming off the bench, whereas Watford's substitution didn't make a difference. If anything, cost us the game.
Yeah, I think it's definitely highlighted, as you say, the fact that the squad depth isn't there, and we've had the whole of the transfer window to address that, and we haven't done. Obviously, the articles have come out. Andrew French has done his interviews with Rob Edwards, and he said, I've had say in the transfer window. But especially with this whole Giaretta stuff that's come out, it maybe points to the fact that he hasn't had as much say as he would have liked. The whole right wing back scenario with massive problem there. I wouldn't have been against bringing another centre mid in, but other than that, I think we addressed the areas we needed to. But they were two big areas for us: right wing back and centre mid. As you say, the substitutes yesterday, I actually thought that he's going for it. I think we were 2-1 up and we brought a defender off. Am I right in saying it was Kamara off and it was back Bio on? So the fact that he made a switch, he brought a striker on and took a defender off, I don't mind that. That says to me that he's happy to go for the game, go for the third goal. But if you flip it on its head, maybe that does speak volumes about the lack of squad depth we got. And as we all know, Ben, in this league, you have to have good squad depth, because it's a long old season, Saturday, Tuesday. We know that it's a cliche of the Championship, and we haven't addressed the areas that we should have done in the transfer window. And we've got injuries, and yes, players are coming back from injury soon. But what about now that the last few games, they've not been? It's not been good enough.
Yeah, and I think Watford kind of started quickly out of the blocks a bit yesterday, Jacob. I think the first 5-10 minutes we started quite well and quite positively, but then we lost that intensity, didn't we? And then we started playing the ball between the centre backs and backmen, and that was just getting frustrating. And then the fans started to lose patience with it, and I think that was going onto the pitch as well. It's not helpful when you got centre halves who can't pass the ball properly, is it, Jacob? And then the fans just quickly, they get on their backs within 10-15 minutes of the game.
Yeah, they do. We obviously spoke about it before we came on. I think it's a pattern of play that was quite consistent with us last season, where Backman or Foster at the time would play the ball out from a goal kick to the defenders, maybe play a couple of passes between them, look for a midfielder, not be a midfielder prepared to show himself. Certainly not to show himself, turn and pick out a forward pass. And I think that's still a massive problem for us. In fairness, look, the defence for me is pretty shocking. I don't think the defence is great. But one thing I would say is that I don't think we've got any creativity in the midfield. This was an issue last year, and I think it's an issue this year as well. We've not got that style of player in midfield, really, that defenders can ping the ball into. They can turn and then look more offensively to try and pick out a pass. So quite often, as you rightly say, you end up, a couple of passes between defenders, back to backman, long ball, you lose the ball and repeat. I agree. I don't think the start was as sluggish as it has been in previous games. I didn't really think there was much in the first half at all. Obviously, we got the goal, went in front, which is great. Probably, a bit sloppy the way we gave away the second one. I know it's a tight call with it being just over the line, but obviously, a goal's a goal. I thought it was a bit sloppy, but then I thought second half for 15, 20 minutes, we were pretty decent. We were camped in their half. And then obviously the subs changed the game. And we sort of gifted momentum back to them. So it felt like it was ours for the taking, really, that first 15, 20 minutes of the second half. We get the goal, go 2-1 up. Should have gone on to win from that point for me.
Yeah, and Mike, just quickly before we go on to the goal quickly as well, we're talking about the centre halves passing in between each other, and Jacob mentioned about how we haven't possibly got that midfield who would maybe come short to receive a ball or try and find space. I don't know if you picked up on this watching at home, but from where I was sitting, I could see it clear as day. The central midfielders for Watford went hiding yesterday. Kiambi was like hiding behind his man every time it went back to a centre half, so he wasn't trying to find space. Hamza was coming towards the ball, but he was getting followed by a man every time, and it just wasn't working. I don't know if you picked up on that watching from TV.
Yeah, absolutely you do. And I think before even Hamza Chowdhury come in, we were screaming out for a midfielder that would come and get the ball and try and make things happen. That's where I think Loser's going to be such a big key part of that we honestly cannot. He cannot come back quick enough for us because he's exactly the type of midfielder that we need. So, yeah, there were times that Hamza Chowdhury was even dropping into the back four at times. And he did that against Blackburn as well. So, it is frustrating. And as you say, Kayembe, he's hit or miss this season. He had a fantastic game against Middlesbrough. We were singing his praises on the podcast, after the Middlesbrough game. And he just went missing yesterday. Chowdhury, has, other than his debut, hasn't really impressed me since. I might be being harsh, but he's not got to the levels that I thought he would. And Pedro can't do it all in the middle on his own. So yeah, it's frustrating. So I think we definitely need Imran Loser back ASAP.
Yeah, he's definitely a man with ability who would come short and spray those balls, and it's what we are lacking at the moment. But one of those balls that he might possibly play is what we saw from Yasser Espria yesterday, Jacob, to cut open the Sunderland defence for Kamara to run into a byline and cut the ball back for Keenan Davis to get that first goal. But we shouldn't really be heavily relying on an 18-year-old to be creating chances like that, Jacob, should we?
No, we shouldn't be. I mean, look, Espria is potentially the bright spark, isn't he, in that team? And he's that creative spark that can make things happen. But you're right. I mean, he's 18. We can't pin our hopes on him dragging us up this year because, it's not fair to do that. You're setting expectations pretty high for a youngster. But yeah, at the moment, I think it says it all, doesn't it? The fact we're looking at an 18-year-old and almost pinning our hopes to a certain extent on him. I know it's not solely on him because we've still got Pedro and Sarr, who obviously carry a lot of the weight of expectation as well. But Espria is probably, based on his performances this year, he's probably not a million miles behind that in terms of what we're expecting from him. But he needs help. Can't do it on his own. Obviously, Mike touched on Kiembe there. Kiembe, for me, I'll be honest, I've been one of his biggest critics this year. I don't rate him. He's not for me. I think there's one or two games more recently where he's probably been a bit better. I think the few times I watched him at the start of the season, he just was absolutely shocking. Didn't particularly seem to want the ball. When he went for the ball, just didn't seem good enough on it. Personally, for me, I just don't think he's good enough. I really don't. For this level at all, I just don't think he's a championship player. I think you could make the argument probably for 4 or 5 of these players in this team. That's the main concern for me. I mean, I look throughout what our normal starting 11 would be and think I'm not entirely sure that all of these players can actually compete at this level full stop. Forget promotion. I'm just talking at this level generally. And that's obviously a big, big concern.
Definitely. I'm not quite sure what KMB does as a footballer. I don't know what his role is on the football pitch sometimes. But he just runs around in circles and he doesn't look comfortable. He might have the odd effort from 30, 25 yards out, which obviously he scored a banger against Keeper, which ruled out. He was close yesterday with an effort as well. Apart from that, I don't think he brings anything to this team. If anything, I think he affects us. He doesn't bring anything to the team what we require. And that's like playing with 10 men at times. Mike, Keenan Davis, I know you want to speak about him. He did grab his first goal for Watford. Our mate Anthony Parsons came up with a comment saying Davis has to start the next game. He's the builder player we need as a main striker. my question to you, Mike, is he that replacement of Troy Deeney that we've waited for years for?
Yeah, he very much reminds me of the old Troy, back in the promotion season and the season leading up to that as well. The ball just sticks to him. Like, he genuinely, every time the ball goes up to him, you're like, he might win a flick on it, and he'll bring it down and he'll just have it for ages. And, Luke O'Nien had an absolute, horrible day yesterday. He scored an own goal. He would have wanted to, prove a point against Watford. And he had to mark Keenan Davis. And every time Davis had the beating of him. And you could tell that Davis was getting frustrated at times. He was making passes, people passing to him, not quite enough on it, too much on it. He was getting frustrated at times. So, he does a lot of the work. And if we can get the players like Pedro, Asprilla, maybe even Bio, he will create chances for them. He didn't score many goals at Forest. He scored 5 goals for Forest that season that they went up last year. And I don't think he'll score a hatful of goals for us. What I do think he'll do is he'll bring others into play and he'll create chances and allow other people to score more goals. Brilliant that he made his, got off the mark in his first start for the club. But honestly, his all-round game is just what we needed. I think I was talking on a pod a few weeks ago before the transfer window closed, saying how I quite like Johnson Clark-Harris because he was sort of a similar mould to Troy. Keenan Davis is a man. He's a man for me that we need up top. He's going to not only score a few goals, he's going to create them as well. And with creative players around him, that's only a recipe for success, hopefully.
Definitely. And Jacob, what was your thoughts on him? I thought first half he was good. I thought second half he was much better. And I don't know if that's because we had Pedro playing a bit closer to him. I thought he was a bit isolated at times in that first half. But second half, I thought we saw what he can bring to his Watford side.
Yeah, 100%. I completely echo the thoughts of Mike on him, really. I think he's exactly what we need. He's the nearest to Deeney that we've had since Deeney left. We've clearly got some talent in the squad, particularly the likes of Pedro, Sarr and Asprilla that I mentioned earlier. Probably what those three lack is they're not necessarily players that can hold up the ball. So potentially they could get marked out the game a bit easier. Davis can hold up the ball. He can bring those guys into play. I think, as Mike correctly mentioned there, he might not score a hatful of goals this year. Hopefully, he surprises us and does bang in a few. But I don't think that's what he's necessarily there to do. Certainly not his only job. He's there to bring the other guys into play. But if we can keep him fit, get him starting games, and get the other guys close to him or closer to him on the pitch, that's going to be where we're going to have joy this season for sure. But I think he's an excellent addition. He is 100% the sort of player that we needed to bring in.
Yeah, and then slightly after his goal, Mike, it was a goal just before half time. You think just go in 1-0 up, regroup, and then come out and attack the second half. But it was a goal given from a referee's whistle. Goal line technology kicked in. I saw you put a tweet out on the podcast account, like saying, it's never over a line with your camera angle. And then minutes later, you said, ignore that.
Yeah, case closed.
The ball did cross the line, but it's just silly, really, isn't it? We shouldn't have allowed the ball to go into the box. I thought Craig Cathcart should have been stronger and maybe stayed on his feet where he fell down. But it's another avoidable goal for Watford, and it's so frustrating just before half time.
Oh, mate, honestly, like they say that is the worst time to concede. That changes the team talks of both managers. Whether you've just scored the equaliser or whether you're on the receiving end of it. And like you said, it's so avoidable. I watched it back time and time again. Before I got the screenshot of the goal line decision, they didn't show you the freeze frame until half time. And as you say, I don't know what it looked like from the ground. I know you're sat right behind that goal bench, so it might have been difficult for you as well. For me, it looked nowhere near over the line. Yeah. I was like, really? Obviously, I'm not going to doubt the technology, but we've seen the other week that Blackpool, I think it was Blackpool or Huddersfield, rightly had a goal that should have stood, but it wasn't given. Obviously, we all remember Sheffield United against Villa in the lockdown season, etc., etc. So we know that it has a tendency to fail. Granted, not a lot, but we then saw the freeze frame and it was well over, but it was such horrendous defending. Like, as you say, Cathcart went down too easily. Wise Backman not pouncing on that straight away. It was just like really schoolboy defending. Like the ball was bobbling around. Their guy that put it over the line, he'd sort of come out of nowhere, just pushed his way in and then had the shot and it went in. So, yeah, I think it's frustrating because A, it was right on the stroke of half time, and B, it was so avoidable. And you just knew, like, we've watched Watford how long, and you just know that when someone's equalises just before half time, it's not going to go to plan. And we knew that we had it all to fight for come the second half. But I thought we started the second half really well, actually, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I was impressed at the reaction coming out in the second half.
Yeah, I was going to go on to that now. Cheers for the lead up, Mike. But yeah, great reaction. I thought from the second half, the moment the second half happened, Jacob, I thought we had a really good period for about 20 minutes. And if anything, yes, we got that second goal, but for me, the biggest issue yesterday was not killing off that game. We had opportunities where we had a lot of possession. We should have got it into the mixer a bit more. We should have worked the keeper more. And that was the most frustrating thing for me yesterday, Jacob. I don't know about you.
Yeah, definitely. We had the momentum, didn't we? As I said earlier, we came out after half time for what I'm pretty sure was 15, 20 minutes. It felt like we were basically camped in their half. They couldn't get over the halfway line. We get the goal. Probably should have made a bit more of that, maybe create a couple more opportunities or try and get that goal. And because it was still relatively early on, it's not necessarily game over at that point of 3-1, but you've got, 2-goal buffer, haven't you, at that stage? It's quite difficult for Sunderland to get back in the game. They've pretty much got to throw caution to the wind. Suddenly you're looking at opportunities on the counter-attack a bit more. So it was frustrating. We didn't make more of it, but it was probably that 15, 20-minute spell was probably the best spell that I've seen from us a consistent period this season. I know I'm clutching a bit there because, we're talking 15, 20-minute spells and not whole games or sequences of games even. So, I'm looking at the silver lining, I suppose, but that was, the best consistent patch of football that we've played. We've got to do more of that. I think Edwards actually spoke about that after the game and sort of acknowledged the fact, that what we were doing then was the right thing. We've got to do more of that, be more aggressive, push higher up the pitch. And clearly that was working at that stage. Frustrating that obviously, it didn't continue as we mentioned earlier. Obviously the substitutes had a big impact on that. But yeah, I think it was a good period for us. We've got to do more of that, haven't we? If we want results this year and we want to kick on up the table and improve, that's clearly the method we've got to follow.
Yeah, it looks like very small baby steps at the moment with Watford under Rob Edwards. Like you said, he did come out afterwards and said that 20-minute spell is what I want this team to do consistently, but for a longer period and for 90 minutes. And we only got it for 20 minutes. But like you say, it's the first time we've actually seen any of that this season. So maybe his ideas are getting across and it's starting to implement, and we're actually seeing how it's working out on the pitch. Mike, Luke O'Nien, he left Watford, got released, didn't he? And ended up joining Wycombe Wanderers. Fantastic career at Wycombe Wanderers in League 2 and 1, I think. I think he got promoted to League 1 with them. Then he got picked up by Sunderland. He's been there 4 or 5 seasons. He's a decent utility player. He can fill in loads of different players, but he actually came back and scored in front of a rookery yesterday for Watford. I bet he's been dreaming about that moment for years.
I know, and it's typical. I think I tweeted the goal saying he obviously misses playing for us. And it's a real shame, to be fair. The kid's obviously got talent, I know this season doesn't necessarily transpire on the football pitch, but I seem to remember he was quite the trickster, wasn't he? He was, keep uppies with tennis balls, and didn't he do something with a basketball? He kicked it in the net. I don't know, but he, obviously quite a likeable lad. He was sort of on the cusp of trying to break in to the season that we got promoted under Jukanovic. So, it didn't work out. He's, done well to come back. He's, well received at Sunderland, getting a game every week at Sunderland as well. Obviously had a bit of a torrid time yesterday coming up against Keenan Davis, but, he seems to have got his career back on track. So fair play to the lad. But yeah, it's a classic example of he obviously felt that there was, something coming from behind. So he thought, I'll just get my head on it, see what happens. Unfortunately for us, he got his head on it and it ended up in the back of the net. But I don't think it was against a run of play. I thought a goal was coming anyway. So that definitely helped. But same old Watford, we go 2-1 up. Yes, we make a sub, bringing on a striker for a defender, but we don't do enough to close out the game, and ultimately we pay the price for it. I mean, they had a goal disallowed before the legitimate equaliser, and it was similar sort of defensive frailty shown for that offside goal than it was the equaliser. But good to respond by going 2-1 up, but again, really disappointing to swoop down to the levels that we've shown in the past games and not able to hold the game out, because a win yesterday would have been a massive relief for us, especially after how bad we played against Blackburn.
And with the international break coming now as well, like 2 weeks now, and that's frustrating. And the players and Ed Wood will be kicking themselves, especially conceding so late on. But like you say, the warning signs were there. We conceded, but it was given as an offside. And I don't know if you picked this up, Jacob, when the offside happened, but I think it's Patrick Roberts, one of their players. He went running right away over to the South Sunderland, and he was like giving it the big one because he thought Sunderland equalised. But the flag was up for about 15 seconds, and everyone else was turned their back and was walking back because they saw the liner. But Patrick Roberts was still celebrating in the corner, and the Sunderland fans let off a flare as well, and that was absolutely brilliant. And then the moment he turned round, he dropped to his knees and there was a massive cheer from the Watford fans just laughing at him. But that was class. You don't see that often, but that was brilliant. Jacob, like I say, the warning signs are there, but again, another stupid goal to concede. And for me, the blame lies solely at Christian Cabaselli, who's just came on. He's replaced Craig Cathcart. He's gone off injured. But I don't know what Cabaselli was thinking there. I don't know if he was trying to like outmuscle the defender or something and get his body in there. But he kind of just falls over, and then it falls to it's another case of the opposition overloading the far post, which we've seen so many times this season, and then they just slot in the goal nice and easy.
It's just so poor, isn't it? It's such a poor goal to concede. Mike, you mentioned about the first one, which was a bit of a stinker to concede. I mean, come on, this one's Sunday League level, isn't it? Really, if we're being honest, he's just put a ball into the box. We're not talking about like a De Bruyne style whipped ball around the back of the defence and he, classed ball around. He's literally just pinged the ball into the box. So easy to defend. Just quite simple. Just watch the ball and head it out. Cabaselli, I mentioned earlier about a few players that we've got in the team that I just genuinely don't think are good enough for this level. Cabaselli for me is one of them. I just think he's had his day. I'm not convinced, even at championship level. I don't think he's good enough. I really don't. I think there's a few players you could put into that bracket, but we sort of, I'm sure we'll touch upon it a bit later in the podcast about the recruitment and how that's been an issue in the last few years, and the fact that we're still playing the likes of Cabaselli, for me, way beyond his sell-by date, is probably an example of that. It's really, really poor. It has to do better. You can't concede goals like that, and we do it on a consistent basis. You can't concede goals like that and expect to do well at any level. It's really, really schoolboy that. Yeah,
and if like me and Mike's had this discussion before, and we're like, we like Christian Cabaselli as a person. I think he's a top guy, does a lot of work for community and for charities and all that. And we've had the pleasure of talking to him and interviewing him. But in my eyes, that doesn't warrant getting into the starting 11. You need to be a decent footballer to be putting on that shirt for Watford, and he's just not a decent footballer. No. He's like you say, past his sell-by date. He's well below par. He wouldn't get into a Rotherham United team.
No, I don't think he would. I think there's a lot of players you could say that about. Worryingly, you look at the worst teams. And by the way, we might be being a bit harsh to Rotherham there because they're actually doing quite well this year. But
they're above us at the table, aren't they?
They're flying, aren't they? To be fair to them, but even if I understand the premise of it. If you look at some of the poorest teams in this division and the teams that are likely to finish at the bottom end of the division, I honestly think we've got a few players that wouldn't get in their teams. That's incredibly concerning, considering we've just come down from the Prem. It's no wonder when you look at it that we got absolutely smashed to bits last year, because the players that know there's a few players that are not at it at this level forget the Prem, honestly.
Yeah. And Mike, I just want to mention, just before we analyse the performance and all that, I know a lot of people have been putting a lot of blame on Rob Edwards and saying Rob Edwards out or is out of his depth, and I think that's absolutely ridiculous, and you shouldn't be going to that length. But we do have a right to be a bit critical over his substitutions, and I thought his substitutions yesterday, I think just one of them was probably critical, and that is bringing on Christian Cabaselli ahead of Giaretta. Whereas if he was in that position for Cabaselli, he would have been strong, he would have headed that ball away, we wouldn't have conceded.
Yeah, I did think that when I saw, because it was Cathcart, wasn't it? He went down injured. So when I saw him go down, I thought, not great. Was it? I'm clutching at straws with what I'm about to say, by the way. So if you're listening, don't hound me here. But was it because Cathcart was playing right back? Is Cabaselli more suited to playing right back to Giaretta? Again, I'm clutching at straws. I would have gone with Giaretta. It doesn't matter. It's the dying embers of the game. You just stick someone on, extra body, someone we know that's going to put his head in there, be strong, like you said. But that's the only thing I can think. And like I said, I'm clutching at straws there. But yeah, I mean, all this stuff about...
There was also young Humbo on the bench who we think could do a job at right wing back.
Yeah, whether he's the type to stick his head in there when it needs to be or when the time matters, I don't know if he would have done. He doesn't strike me as someone that's defensively got the right sort of attributes to be doing that. He's more attacking. You look at his loan spell he had at Ross County and, a lot of goals, a lot of attacking flair, a lot of excitement. Whether he's the right person to come on and shore up the defence, I'm not sure. It's like Ngakia. Rob said that Ngakia and Davis were the two shining lights out of Blackburn. Well, I must have been watching a different channel because I thought Ngakia got turned inside out by Ben Brereton Diaz, and they knew exactly what they were doing. And I'm not surprised that he's injured after that because he got the absolute runaround. So, yeah, maybe the substitutions, obviously not the Cabaselli one, but maybe the other ones point to that, what you said earlier about the lack of depth. Maybe that highlights the lack of depth that we got. But I just want to say, these people that are saying about Rob Edwards, is he out of his depth or he's a nice guy, but he should be going. Wouldn't be surprised if he's gone. These are the same people that when we sack a manager, they're like, I wish we were stable. I wish we, for God's sake, man, it's one or the other. I want us to, I often go on opposition podcasts and you can imagine every opposition podcast, Watford are known for changing the manager. I lose count the amount of times that they say that to me. And it gets on my tits. It really does. But, at the end of the day, we do it. And I agreed with it. Agreed, loosely term there. But I didn't have a problem with it until the season we went down in lockdown. When we got rid of Javi and then brought in Kike, then Pearson. So, that was the first season where I thought, hang on, we need to chill out a bit now. So the fact that we've gone down the route of getting a young British manager in who supposedly plays attacking football, I think he does. I just think it's not gonna come through yet. I hate to bang on and keep sounding like a broken record. Yes, things aren't great at the moment, but you have to remember we're 9 games into the season. So if we're still doing this and we're, let's say, 20 games into the season and we're still playing like this and the problems are still there, then yeah, absolutely, question him. But don't be one of those fans that at the end of last season was like, we need to get a young British manager in. We've got him in. We're 9 games into the season. We've not had the greatest of starts. And people are like, get him out. He's out of his depth. He's a nice guy, but he's out of his depth. Come on, give him time. This was bound to happen. We've had a rebuild as well. This is what people don't understand. So it just does my head in.
What's your take on this, Jacob? Because if I'm honest, I think that Rob Edwards has really been hung out to dry here by the hierarchy, the board, sporting director Scott Duxbury, and I think he's doing pretty well with the hand that he's been given.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, where do we start with this? I mean, it hung out to dry massively. The recruitment at the football club is so bad, and it's been so. I mean, listen, obviously, I've been speaking about this to you boys and a few others for a long time now, complaining about the recruitment. This isn't a thing of the last year or two. I think the recruitment's been questionable for a few years, and obviously, the last couple in particular, it's the chickens have come home to roost, haven't they? And we've obviously suffered the consequences. If you're a supporter, for me, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and complete respect to that. But if you're a supporter right now, calling for Rob Edwards to go or questioning whether or not he should go, you need to be asking yourself some serious questions. You can't, as Mike absolutely says, we can't want lasting change and then in the next breath, 9-10 games into the season, say, we want another manager. Because that's not change. Nothing's going to change. If he goes right now, and I'll be very honest, I'm fearful that he might in this international break. It seems to be a point where in the past the Pozzos have pulled the trigger. Mike, I mentioned just before we came on today about Xisco. Munoz's been in the last 2 games, and you don't think there's much to that.
No,
I mean, I think there might be. But we'll obviously find out, won't we, in the next few weeks. But so it wouldn't surprise me if they pulled the trigger. But you can't have it both ways. If you genuinely want change, I'd actually go a step further than what you said, Mike. I think you mentioned that maybe around 20 games of the season. Let's see how it's going there. Give him the season. I don't care what happens on the pitch. Honestly, I know it sounds like a bit of a stupid thing to say because, of course, we all want us to do well. But if we genuinely want change, it might just be we've got to sacrifice this season. So give him the season. And if we have an absolute shocker and we decide at the end of the season, do you know what, he hasn't been good enough, it might be time for a change. Someone else could do better. Fair enough. Okay, then we can make a decision. But right now, is another manager going to come in? There's 2 things we've got to ask ourselves here. First question, who would we realistically get? And the second thing is the best potential candidate that we could get, are they actually going to do any better? Probably not. The issue here isn't the manager, it's the playing staff, the squad is not good enough. And whose fault is that? It's certainly not the manager's fault. So, this is issues that have gone back way before he was at the football club. So it's just ridiculous talking about getting rid of him now. I understand people are frustrated. I'm going and watching the games as well. I'm frustrated. And despite me saying that, that doesn't mean that Edwards gets a free pass and he shouldn't be criticised for certain things, because I think yesterday he didn't cover himself in glory. Personally, his substitutions cost us the game. So it doesn't mean that he just gets a free pass and whatever he does is brilliant. It doesn't mean that. But at the same time, I think you can question certain decisions he makes within games without also calling for him to go. But, if he goes now, it's just the same cycle all over again. We just, we're continuing on this merry-go-round, and where's it going to end? We're just going to keep flying through managers. The Pozzos aren't going to learn the lesson in terms of recruitment, and I'll probably fear the long-term results will be we'll just fly down to the divisions. It won't be an upward trajectory because, it's not I know we've had a good run up until the last couple of years, and the overall project has been a success. I don't think you can deny that. But the last 2-3 years, clearly it's no longer working. It's time for change.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with the news of Cristiano Giaretta leaving his role as sporting director as well. Is that going to give Rob Edwards more responsibility or a bit more freedom to do bits and pieces that he might want to do? I know Uncle Ron's doing a Twitter Spaces at 9:15, and supposedly he's got an exclusive on the reasons why Giaretta was sacked or stepped down or given a different role, which is Adam Levitard's gone on to say today. It'd be interesting to see what those reasons are. But Scott Duxbury, a few months ago, wasn't it, at the start of the season, he came out with a quote saying, "We'll be supporting Rob Edwards come high or high water." Mike, is that another lie from Scott Duxbury? Because what I watched yesterday and the players we've seen on that pitch, that's a blatant lie to me.
Oh, only time will tell if they back him through hell and high water.
Not backed him first transfer window though, have they?
No, I mean, I do believe a certain degree of what Rob has said in these Andrew French articles. Andrew's been brilliant at getting actual answers, and his articles have been second to none, and top drawer really have. So he's not afraid to ask questions where other journalists might tiptoe around. So we have to respect him for that. And Rob has said, he's come out and he said, he's been heavily involved in the transfers. I don't think he's been heavily as involved as he would have liked. There were mitigating circumstances around Kane Wilson, for example. A lot of people say, why didn't we go after him? Led to believe that was due to location was a big thing. Bristol Rovers coming in for him, Forest Green down that way. That's just an example. But I think in terms of backing him, it's not just in the transfer window as well. It's, as Jacob said, if he goes for a bit of a rotten spell, I've said it time and time again, there will be a time this season where we lose 3-4 on a bounce, 100%. And I think that's when it's going to be testing. Do we stick by him or do we pull the trigger? Jacob said he's a bit fearful now. As we know, going into an international break, that's when the Pozzos tend to pull the trigger. I don't think they will. I don't think Xisco Munoz will come in. I know he went to West Brom Birmingham as well. I would imagine Troy has probably sorted him tickets for that. I believe he's just over here visiting football stadiums and watching Watford. So I don't read anything into that. Yeah, he could have been backed more in the transfer window. We know that we don't go out there and spend masses and masses of money. We don't tend to dip into the English transfer market either. Obviously, Brexit will have a big impact on that. The news come out. There's a There's an option to buy with Keenan Davis, 10 to 15 million. I said to you, Ben, I'd be very surprised if we paid that, because I can't remember the last time we sort of spent that sort of money in the English market, or if we have at all since the Pozzos come in. Only time will tell whether they're going to back him. We got another transfer window coming up in January. That'll come around before we know it. So will things change? Will this Giaretta sort of stuff that's gone on? We don't even know if he's been sacked. Leventhal saying that his role's going to be stripped back. Andrew French saying he's gone. We don't know what's going on. I know that Forest Green Rovers have got, they had a guy, Richard Hughes he was the head of recruitment, worked closely with Rob at Forest Green Rovers. I wouldn't be against bringing someone like that in, someone English, someone that knows the market, knows gems to get. Get someone like that in, we might see an improvement. But only time will tell with that statement whether they will back him. But we absolutely have to. If we want a project and we want to change our ways, we can't go calling for the manager's head 9 games into the season. I think it's quite frankly ridiculous. But yeah, Duxbury's got a few things to answer for, absolutely.
Jacob, what's your take on the whole, that quote of Scott Duxbury, and do you feel like Rob Edwards has been backed?
I said to someone yesterday at the game, Duxbury, there's one or two things with Duxbury for me. Either he's obviously fed information by the Pozzos in terms of, club strategy, recruitment plan, and so on. And Duxbury is obviously then the more public-facing figure that then comes out with these sort of statements. So Duxbury has said, we're going to back Rob Edwards. We're going to do this. He said he's been recorded before saying, it's different this time. We've learned our lessons. These sort of things have been quoted from him. Okay. And I said to someone yesterday, there's one or two things going on here. Either he believes the information that the Pozzos is telling him. He believes in it. He believes in the strategy and the recruitment, in which case he's probably a bit naive. Or the second thing is he's just an outright liar. They're genuinely, if we're being honest, they're the two situations, aren't they? There's no alternative situation to that. They've not backed him through hell and high water. They've not done that. We can see that. Ben, I mentioned to you before the game yesterday, what I would like to see is some form of transparency from the Pozzos in terms of what their actual plan is. I don't expect them to unveil all of their hidden secrets. There's obviously certain things as an owner of a football club you cannot share publicly and you cannot share with the fan base. And that's fine. I've got no issue with that. But at least come and explain something. Why have we not, gone a bit harder in the transfer market? Is it a case of there are some financial difficulties there? Are they trying to clear some debt? I mean, one of the things you and I were speaking about yesterday, Ben, if they came out and said, do you know what? We've got 50 million quid's worth of debt. Just for example, we've got 50 million quid's worth of debt. We want to service that debt and clear that before we really sign anyone seriously. Fair enough. It's not perfect, But I would appreciate the honesty and the transparency and think, do you know what? Fair enough. They're trying to protect the long-term sustainability of the club. I can get behind that. It's not ideal, but at least we know what's going on. But we don't know what's going on. All that we hear is, things like, oh, we've just sold Kamara to Udinese for 60 million quid. He's been loaned back to us. You think, well, what the hell's all that about? And this is the problem. This is the big frustration with it. But they don't seem to have backed him. The business we get rid of Giaretta. I mean, Giaretta clearly wasn't a particularly popular man around the place. A lot of people not particularly happy with him online, but he's, in my mind, he's almost a sacrificial lamb here, isn't he? Exactly the same as Giraldi was, however long ago that was 18 months, 2 years ago now when Giraldi went. At the time, he was the public enemy, effectively, wasn't he? He was the one that we all thought, right, that guy's got to go. He's gone. Giaretta's come in and nothing's changed. And, in the last few weeks, the frustration has been growing. And then suddenly they've got to react and do something. So what happens when Giaretta goes? I'm not massively convinced it's actually going to change anything. I'm getting nearer to the point of thinking, well, actually, Duxbury and the Potsos are the issue. Something has to change. I'm not necessarily saying change of ownership, by the way, but something within the system has to change because this right now isn't working.
Yeah, Mike, what would you say? Who is to blame really for all of this mess? If we got rid of Giraldi, everyone thought he was the problem. We've brought in Giaretta. We thought he's a problem. He's gone again. What is the problem at Watford Football Club? Who is to blame?
It's the recruitment.
Does it all fall into the hands of Gino Pozzo? Because at the end of the day, it's his football club and he hires these people and he makes the final say on everything.
It's the recruitment. So it's whoever's in charge of recruitment. Yes, the manager will say, I've got these targets. Look, remember, Vladimir Ivic was desperate for a left-back. He's never got one. Well, he did. Right towards the end of the season, we got that Lazar, the Moroccan fella.
Better off not happening.
Exactly. So that sort of speaks volumes. It's almost as if they're afraid to spend money. Is that the right word? I think as well, it's worth pointing out the money that we've made this season off selling people and buy-on clauses, I believe is somewhere in the region of around £100 million. You look at, just for an example, Pervis Estupiñán. We got a decent amount from him. I think about 3 million. Luis Suarez has gone to Marseille. We got money from him. I'm sure there's a couple out there, but they were just examples off the top of my head. So we've got the money coming in. And yes, obviously you lose a lot of money going down from the Premier League to the Championship. No one's denying that. And a lot of that money will have gone to certain areas off the pitch that we don't see. Not a problem. But it's ultimately down to the recruitment. And yes, you could say that does funnel back up to Mr. Pozzo. He's not putting the right people in charge of recruitment. The way that they do it over there in Italy, it might work perfectly. But he's been in the English game long enough to know now that, and he's seen evidence that it's not perhaps worked. The times are changing and we've not sort of gone along with the times changing. It was brilliant when we first come in. We were signing all these players from Udinese. Granted, some of them were crap, but a lot of them had, Champions League, Europa League experience. Alman Abdi, Daniel Pudil. They did superbly well for us. But it's almost as if the times have gone along, but we've still stood still where we were, and we've not sort of got with the times and got with how we should be. There is also an element of Udinese doing incredibly well in Serie A at the moment. There was a time.
Their win today. They beat Inter Milan 3-1 to go top of Serie A, didn't they?
I didn't even know they beat them today, and I didn't even know that they went top. So that within itself, if they finish in the top four, they've got Champions League. It wasn't long ago that picture circulates of that Udinese game where there's a banner in the stand that says Udinese underneath Watford shit. And Udinese fans don't like us because there was a stage where the Pozzos were putting all their eggs in the Watford basket and then leaving Udinese sort of behind because there was more money to be made in the English game. And we were like, yeah, brilliant. And now we're starting to feel like, I think, what the Udinese fans have been feeling like for the last few years. Like, well, hang on a minute, you own us as well. We are still here. Yes, getting into the Champions League for their other club will be massive. It will help them financially. The games will be, really, really good. Let's not forget, before they bought us, Udinese were regularly a European football team. So I think we're on the receiving end of that now, and we feel like we're maybe being left behind a bit. But all they need to do, if they just bring in a new, if they want someone to head the front of sort of doing all the transfer bits, get someone English in, someone British in, someone that's been in the English game. So Giaretta didn't have previous experience in England, off the top of my head. Giraldi didn't. They don't know the leagues. It's all well and good trying to pick gems off, and we've done brilliantly, South American players, European players, but get someone that knows the lower leagues, League 2, League 1. I'm seeing all these players go into Championship, prolific scorers in the Championship, doing well in the Championship, get into the Premier League. And it's all because it will all stem down that someone at the club will be like, oh, by the way, there's some shit-up kid in League 2. Keep an eye on him, see how his progression goes. And that's where it stems from. We haven't got anyone in that sort of area that knows the Football League inside out. And I think that's quite telling, to be honest.
And a team who's quite good at that, Mike, is like who always cherry pick like good talent from League 2 for National League is Peterborough United. They sell on a big star, then they've got the research and someone who knows the leagues, and they just go get like the best talent in the National League, League 2. They come in, then hit the floor running for 1-2 seasons. They sell them on for a big fee, and it's frustrating having a club like Watford where we've got Giaretta come in. He's a former Udinese sporting director, and Udinese fans absolutely hated him, and they got him out in the end. So why do we have to pick up their scraps?
As well, just quickly as well, you mentioned Peterborough so well. It's not even that hard to do. Any football fan knows if there's a player that's playing well in League 2 and that, it's well documented. I mean, one that springs to mind to me, there's a lad that Notts County have just signed, and whether the only reason I know about this is because of living in Nottingham, but Notts County has signed someone from Gateshead, and he scored something like 26 goals in the National League North. He's scored in every game he's played so far for Notts County, and he's still young. I guarantee, give it a couple of years, he'll be in the Football League, and he'll be one that people are knocking at his door. Langstaff, his last name is. So, it is, all it takes is getting someone in that knows the leagues. And, even if Rob says, well, I work with this guy at this club, or I worked with him at him, get someone in that knows the manager. Because there's that trust then between them two, and they'll be like, well, I think we need this position. Yeah, well, remember him, let's get him. And, it's just frustrating because the frustrating thing is it's so avoidable and it's easy to sort out as well, in my eyes anyway.
Well, whilst we're talking about recruitment, and I feel like that transfer window we've just had, half of those are what maybe Giaretta wanted, and half of them were what Rob Edwards wanted. And I think we've seen towards the end of the window with the likes of Hawes, Chowdhury and Davis, they're the kind of players we should be recruiting and bringing in, not like the likes of Bio, Manai. Like, let's be honest, Edwards probably never heard of them before and didn't really want them. He wanted these young, proven Championship players to come in and hit the ground running, and he just hasn't got that. Jacob, I saw something interesting on Twitter yesterday that Luan's put out, and it's about our recruitment since the Pozzos have taken over. I don't know if you've seen this, but I'll read it out for everyone now. Watford have signed 30 centre-backs since the Pozzos have taken over. Only Pollock, Wilmot, Dawson, Kabul and Cabaselli cost money. All of them combined cost £12 million. Since the Pozzos have taken over, they've spent £500 million. And we've only spent £12 million on our centre-backs. Take the floor, Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where'd you go from here? I mean, to put this into perspective, I remember thinking after the cup final, so we've just got to an FA Cup final, albeit obviously we all know we got hammered. But listen, we got to an FA Cup final, which was probably beyond our wildest dreams before that happened. We just finished in our record Premier League, record high in the Premier League. So a good season. I remember thinking in that summer, that defence needs reinforcements. And obviously, as we know, that the next season we went down, they didn't get the reinforcements they needed. A classic example of the recruitment, being poor and certain areas being neglected. It's inexcusable, that, isn't it? I mean, 500 million quid and only 12 of it is on defence. What do you think is going to happen? This is, the logic. There's some parts of this are maybe more complex than perhaps we're alluding to, and that's that's football, isn't it? That's just how it goes. Sometimes there's stuff behind the scenes that we're not always privy to, or we don't always have the knowledge of. But actually, as a part of it, it's very, very simple. If you don't invest properly in certain areas, what are you expecting? If you think about what for me has been there's clearly been an obvious shift in the last few years. If you think about 2015 when we went up, and there was a real aggressive move in the transfer market that summer. We brought in Etienne Capoue, who, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was a transfer record for us at the time. I've got a feeling that same summer, am I right in saying we broke a transfer record on Isaac's success as well?
It was the season after, I think.
That was the season after. Albeit that particular one didn't work out, obviously, but the intent was there. We also signed Roberto Pereira, Valon Barami came. There was a real sign of intent there where it was a case of, look, we're not taking anything to chance. If we need to spend money on people, we'll spend money on people. We're going to get the right players in. You compare that first transfer window going into the Premier League compared to when we most recently went up into the Premier League in that transfer window, and we brought in the 34-year-old Kuka on a, was it a loan deal with a view of signing or whatever it was, a couple of million quid. An aging Musa Sissoko for 4 million quid. Danny Rose. I mean, the shift. There's clearly been a shift because there was not the same attitude in that most recent transfer window going into the Premier League compared to the first one. And the same applies when you talk about what we've invested in the defence compared to the rest of the squad. The same applies when you look at transfer windows. What do you think is going to happen in that situation? You sign a 34-year-old midfielder who has never played in the Premier League before, and you sign him to be one of your main players in the Premier League. What do you think is going to happen? That's not rocket science, that element to it. And Mike, I actually agree with what you said, and there'll be a few people that might raise an eyebrow or two at this. I don't think the recruitment's that hard. I honestly, genuinely, I don't. Over the years, I know in our group chat, I've regularly thrown out some names, and you've laughed at me with a few of them. But there's a few players that, if we would have acted quickly at the time, were pretty obvious. Like, I'm not an expert; I'm just a football fan like anyone else, and I can see it. So if I can see it, don't tell me that these scouts can't see it. I remember at the time looking at someone like Eze at QPR, who was obviously going to, developing into a very good player. And Palace obviously nicked him. Michael Elise at Reading was another one. And again, Palace nicked it. I think it was 8 million quid. We had the opportunity to get Ivan Toney. It was pretty obvious what we were signing there. That wasn't a case of, we're taking a bit of a gamble on this guy. It was pretty, it's fairly straightforward. And it's great that we're trying to look beyond those horizons and maybe look in the South American markets and European markets. And that's fantastic when it works, like a Richarlison or a João Pedro. I just think that is then a needle in a haystack. If you're searching through, particularly South America, if you're searching through those divisions to find a player, finding the player in the first place is probably not that easy. B, you've then got to make sure that he's good enough and can adapt to our division. There's just so much more to it. Let's just try and focus on players. If they still want to do that in the background, fine. I don't have an issue with that. And if it works and pays off, great. But that can't be our go-to every time, or players that have played in random leagues around Europe. That can't be the main pool of our recruitment. The main pool of our recruitment, as you both just said, rightly so, has to be lower divisions. And effectively, football's very simple. There's a food chain in football. And this is exactly how we've got Rob Edwards. We are above Forest Green in the food chain. We get Rob Edwards as a result. If Rob Edwards delivers at Watford and does a good job, someone, I'm sure, will nab him off us. And that's fine. That's just our place in the footballing world. But the same goes with players. We need to be looking at League 2, League 1, and maybe even the lower end championship teams and picking off their best players to move us up. That's how you improve. That's how you improve a squad. And Leicester City, I know Leicester have obviously had a bit of a rough time this season. They're struggling so far. But you look at the incredible journey they've been on the last few years with the league and FA Cup, and narrowly missing out on Champions League a couple of years running when they probably should have made it. Leicester have improved that squad over the years by doing exactly that. James Maddison they picked off from Norwich. Johnny Evans they picked up on the cheap from West Brom, and West Brom got relegated. So they signed Johnny Evans for £2 or £3 million. Brilliant signing. There's so many examples of what they've done, and we just consistently seem to fail to do that. I just genuinely don't think it's that difficult. As I say, I'm sure there'll be a few people that are raising eyebrows at that. Is maybe a bit more complicated than I'm alluding to. But for me, I think you have to follow that model. But clearly, having someone like Giaretta or another foreign person that maybe doesn't know the leagues clearly isn't going to benefit that if they want to adopt that strategy. But this is where we need some transparency from the Potsos or Duxbury. What is the strategy? They say that there's certain things we can't really share this information with the public. That's fine. There's certain things you can't, but that you can. You can tell us. I'm not saying tell us your top 5 targets. I'm not saying that. I'm saying what's the strategy? What's the plan? They can do that, surely.
You'd think so. That's what all Watford fans want. We just want communication from the hierarchy, from Scott Duxbury. We want it all filtered down to us fans. And I totally agree with both of you saying it. Recruitment's not that difficult. I think it's plain to see. We can pick out players who would fit in, like you've just listed a few there, Jacob, and it's what other teams do, like with West Ham going down to Hull and getting Gerard Bowen, and it's just you just buy the best of players in those divisions, don't you? Because they want that step up to that division, and I'm sure there's people like Mike says. There's a decent striker at Peterborough who's banging in the goals at the moment. Is it Clark Harris, Mike?
Yeah, I think we should have gone. I would have liked. I wouldn't have turned my nose up if we went for him, but I think Davis is someone that is also capable of doing that job. But Johnson Clark Harris, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Like there's players out there who would do the step up. And yeah, I think we'll probably wrap it up there. We've been on for an hour or so. I'm sure Mike wants another beer, so we'll probably wrap it up now.
I do actually.
But yeah, thank you, Jacob, for coming on again. I really appreciate it.
Mike, appreciate it.
What was that?
Yeah. Thanks for having us on, Ben. Appreciate it.
Oh, nice one. Yeah, no, cheers for that, Mike, Jacob. And Mike, also, just want to say cheers for stepping in last week. I was obviously on holiday, so I couldn't record, but I watched it back and you did a top job with Tom from Golden Pages. Cheers for doing that and then back to hosting. I heard you was a little bit nervous, but you smashed it, mate.
Yeah, no, it was great to get him on, considering the last time he was on, Jacob was going for him, gone straight for the throat with him. I thought this is going to be an interesting one. Do you fancy coming on? Surprised he didn't say Jacob's not coming on, is it? But no, it was it was good to be back in the hosting chair, and I'm enjoying these. I just hope that the results follow suit. Sorry, but
hopefully, yeah. I think our next game is away to Stoke City, which is live on Sky Sports. I think it's a Sunday 2:00 kickoff, or 12:00 kickoff. So we've got 2 weeks off now. International football's here. I don't know if it's probably came at the right time for Watford fans. I think we all need a break. We need like a 2 weeks rehab break from Watford, because it is frustrating, especially after watching yesterday, throwing it away. Once again, our underinvested defence has let us down, and shock horror. But yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you everyone for watching. If you've liked the video, don't forget to hit that like button. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Tell your mates, and yeah, come on, you Warns.